Hello everybody and welcome to Spidey Sunday number 4. Today what we're going to look at is Spider-Man Noir number 1 from the first series from 2009. So I do have both the regular and the variant. We're going to be using the variant. When this series came out, it was not a very popular series. It had a very small print run, and I think I might have been the only person who actually bought these series because I just thought the cover art was cool and it was Spider-Man, so hey, why not? But without wasting too much more time, let's get into the review. Okay, so the story here starts at the Daily Bugle. It's in 1933 in New York. And so what's happening here on the first page is that there's been an emergency. J. Jonah Jameson has been shot, and the police have been called, and they come in, want to know where he is. They say that he's in his office. He is in his office, and he's clearly been shot, and of course we have Spider-Man there, which is not gonna look good for Spidey, of course. And, you know, that doesn't always help, you know, because J. Jonah Jameson's never really been too big of a fan of Spider-Man now, has he? So the cops think that Spider-Man did, of course, shoot J. Jonah Jameson, so they go after him, but of course we know how fast Spidey is. He spins some webs at them and then hops out the window, and they are unable to catch him. And so this first scene is sort of like taking place a little bit in the future. Not too far in the future, but a little bit in the future. And I wish that they would have said that because it would have helped explain things a little better, but that's okay. So, so we pick it up here. So what's different about this book as compared to most other Spider-Man books is that there is a running monologue throughout the story, but it's not Peter Parker's monologue. It's this guy, Uric, who is a photographer for the Daily Bugle, a position that we know that Peter Parker has held. And so he wants to take this one guy's picture here, and he says, sure, the Bugle's a good paper. I got the front page right here. Sports page in my shoes. And I saved the financial section to wipe my keister. So, you know, it's some funny stuff. And then we get into the next part where we get to see May Parker. Now, in this story... Oh, we've got some ads. In this story, May Parker is... Well, for starters, she's a socialist, and she is, you know, protester. She's trying to rally people. You know, her husband was murdered for similar sort of activities. Never great stuff. Never gonna make people too happy. And what's kind of interesting here with this scene is the guys who were brought in to sort of break up the scene are the enforcers Ox, Fancy Dan, and Montana, the Goblin's muscle. We know what that means. One of them here is saying, you don't like the way we do things in America, you should get on a boat and go join your comrades in Russia. The response is, young man, from May, sorry, the response is, young man, the last time I looked, the Constitution of this country protected my freedom of speech. And then, you know, one of them grabs her And then Peter Parker says, don't lay a finger on my aunt or I'll. And then, you know, the guy grabs him and says, you know, it's past your bedtime, kid, and punches him in the stomach. And not so great. Peter Parker doesn't have his Spidey powers yet. Like I said, that first page was not quite there yet at that point. So, what's going on here next? And so these guys are, you know, roughing up May, and not a very nice thing to do. But then you see here it says "Say cheese, fella," and it's Urich, and he's taking a picture, and one of them here is responding, "What do you know, Ben Urich," poking his snout in the muck as usual, and his response is, "Do you boys want to see your mugs all over the Bugle tomorrow, or are you gonna back off and let these people go about their business?" Very brave guy, it would seem. And so ultimately what we learn is that he's untouchable. We don't know why yet, but he's untouchable. And so the scene, they leave, they break it up. He's concerned about Peter and May. Asks Peter if he's okay. He says that he's okay, that he's fine. May thanks him for his kindness, and he says, "You're welcome, you know. Can I give you guys a ride home, just to make sure that you're safe?" And so he gives them a ride home, and, you know, these guys are talking about when are they going to be able to get Urich, and they say, well, you know, soon enough. It's not quite time yet, because he's still untouchable. And so obviously Peter is very upset about this situation, you know, like, he says it here, he says, "Damn it, why do those gangsters come after us? It's the system we're attacking, the banks, the businesses, the politicians." And then Urich, in his monologue to himself, says, "I should have gotten in my car and driven away, but something about the kid, the sheer stubborn righteous anger of him." And then he says, "Are you allowed to go out after midnight?" And then the monologue continues. "Maybe I wanted to test him, to show him the brutal reality of the world and watch that light in his eyes die away." So basically, he takes him out at this, remember, the 1933 Prohibition is still going on. So he's taking him to an illegal club where I guess they serve drinks. And, you know, they walk in, they're greeted. He asks if she says that she'll clear his regular table for him, and get him a whiskey. And he says, "Get the kid a soda." His response is that he wants a whiskey. She asks him if he's old enough to be drinking. And Peter Parker's wonderful response here is, "I'll show you my birth certificate and you show me your liquor license." Ba-doom boom. Good one, Pete. So that's good stuff there. So Peter is wondering why Goblin's goons said that he was off limits, and his response is it's the power of the press. For some reason, I don't think that that's the reason, but, well, you never know, maybe we'll find out. And so Peter wants to know why he brought him there. He starts saying how, like, you know, I know you have this whole idealized vision of how the world should be, you know, socialist, everybody sharing everything, all of this, and that it'll all be sunshine and roses, but he tells him that that's just a dream, and that he brought him here because this is reality, and he wants him to take a look and see what reality is. Oh, we got an interesting ad there, too. And so, I'll just get that a little bit more centered for there. So basically, he's saying to Peter, like, look around. We got the mayor. We got the head of the vice squad. And this one here, this guy is... Peter's Uncle Ben's protests got 3 of his factories shut down. So he's showing, I guess, showing him the dirty underbelly of New York at the time in 1933. And you see here, Norman Osborne is making his entrance, the Goblin. So in this series, there's no hiding that he's the Goblin. He's just is what he is type thing. And you'll also recognize some of the other guys that he is with too, but we'll get to that. He says here, you wanted to know why the Goblin was coming after you. The Goblin doesn't personally give a damn about you or your aunt or anyone else. He's a freelance. He works for the highest bidder. They use him because it wouldn't look good to have the police fighting freedom of speech. So Peter asks, are you saying that the mayor hired the Goblin to kill my Uncle Ben? And Urich's response is, Alcuno probably did the deal. Crane would have put up the fee. Sure, the cops were looking the other way, and the mayor just sits back and takes a percentage. And then he says, it's a tangled web, Peter. So basically, he's educating him on why, look at this old Netflix ad there. I think they're much bigger now than they were back then. So then, here we finally get to meet some of the enforcers here. So Norman Osborne, Peter wants to know why he's called the Goblin. The response is, no one knows. He's a man of many mysteries, why he chose to trawl through every broken down circus and carnival freak show to put together his gang. And so then we start to learn that who his gang is. And we have Craven, and we have the Vulture. And so we already know that we've got some dangerous guys here. And he says the Vulture was a geek before the Goblin found him. He was lying in a cage biting heads off of chickens. You don't ever want to cross the Vulture. And then, Norman Osborne walks over to their table, and he says, look what the cat dragged in. And he's saying, hello to Urich. And but he knows Peter Parker's name. And he says, your Uncle Ben Parker, the agitator. So they're aware of who Peter is, and that's not a good thing for Peter. And that's not... I'm sure that'll come into play later on in the story. And so Urich makes like a sort of tongue-in-cheek comment here. He's saying, the unfortunate death of Ben Parker, that he was torn apart, what is it? Was it wild dogs? And Peter says, my uncle was murdered by low-life scum. They start to argue. Basically, Urich says, we've overstayed our welcome. It's time for us to get out of here. And so, after they've left and they're outside, Ben Urich says to Peter, he says, damn it, do you even realize that? And he stops himself. Peter says, what? He thinks to himself, that the only thing that's keeping you alive from this moment on is me. And then he just says out loud to Peter, nothing, come on, I'll take you home. Peter replies, I got the message in there, Mr. Yurik. You think we can't fight them? That we can never win, but I'm not going to close my eyes and run away from this. Yurik's response is, you want to do something? You really want to do something? So he tells Peter Parker if he really wants to do something, then he'll take him to talk to his boss, J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle. And so, he says, Yurik tells me you're a good kid, that you're an orphan, and that your uncle has also just died. I hear that that they're still looking for the murderers. And he says, so you want to join the Fourth Estate? And then his response is, no, I want to study. And then Jameson interrupts him and he says, science, right. But you can't afford to go to college if you don't have a job in the meantime. And then Jameson says, I suppose I should feel honored for you to want to work here. Peter says, no, sir, and Jameson butts in and says, did you know there's a married couple living in a cave in Central Park because they have nowhere else to go? There's children starving in the middle of the richest nation that has ever existed in the history of the planet. And Yurik sort of butts in. He says there's a million sob stories out there. None of them become special until we make them special. Yurik has a unique talent. He knows how to put words and pictures together. A picture, my boy, can be worth 1,000 words, and I'm speaking as a man who has built a career on words. So basically, he's telling him that Yurik is a good guy to learn from here. And, Peter's gonna join the team. The Daily Bugle team. And then outside, she's saying to Peter there, you look like you've been hit by a truck. Did he give you the make 'em weep speech? And Peter's response is, listen, Mr. Yurik, I really don't know anything about. And then he tells him, don't worry, I'll be taking the pictures. You'll be toting my gear and setting up lights. You're not a photographer yet. Don't worry, you're just gonna be like my aide, basically. And so he starts taking Pete out on the job. And I just want to read the, monologue thoughts here that Ben Yurik is thinking. He says, I watched Peter as we went looking for the broken hearts of the city. The anger I already seen in him burned fiercer with every injustice he witnessed. Sorry, the lighting is making it very hard for me to see those words. I saw myself in him. The way I was when I still had the idealism of the arrogance of youth, when I still believed I could change the world. One night, we had up front from a cop, a suicide. The poor sap owed money to the Goblin. They threatened his family if he didn't pay it up. So he took the only way out that he could. He told his wife in his farewell letter that if he was dead, that they'd leave her alone. He had that wrong, of course. His wife will inherit that debt. The Goblin always collects. So this version of the Goblin is, just as sinister as the one that we know from the regular Spider-Man comics. And so, up here in this panel here, Peter's talking. He says, do you see that guy's wife? She knew who was to blame. Everyone knows what the Goblin is doing, but everyone's too scared to speak. No one sees anything, no one hears anything. And then he starts talking about, you know, the situation with his Uncle Ben, and how he's the one who found him and, you know, ripped apart by dogs. Urich's monologue says, it was old news to me. I know how he died. What I didn't know was that it was Peter who found his uncle's mutilated body. I thought I'd had it bad, but I never went through that pain and loss that's been thrown into that kid's life. And then basically, like he says, you know, it's although it looked like it was you know, they set dogs on Uncle Ben, it was not dogs that killed Uncle Ben. Because, and he says here, Peter was wrong about one thing. It wasn't dogs that killed Ben Parker. It was the vulture. And so, you know, that, and then we see our Sinister Six, if you will, to be continued. That is our cover for the next issue. And tell me, does this seem strange to anybody? I just noticed this today when I pulled it out. Is it odd for a DC movie to be advertised on the back of a Marvel book? Like, to me, it just seemed a little bit strange. But anyway, I think we'll continue along with this story. Next week on Spidey Sunday number 5, we will do issue number 2 of this series. So I just want to thank you for joining me here on Spidey Sunday number 4, here on the Son of the Morning Comics channel. If you like this content, hit that like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, leave some comments, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. It all helps. And you can always visit me over at Son of the Morning 7 over on Twitter. See you later.